I'd like to read this morning from Psalm 16 and 23. Keep me safe, my God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. I say of the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones in whom is all my delight. Those who run after other gods will suffer more and more. I will not pour out libations of blood to such gods, or take up their names on my lips. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful ones see decay. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. And from Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen.
Amen. Well, as Sean's already said to us, the series is finishing today as we look at this Man in the Mirror series. I've found it to be wonderful to be able to go through the book of Psalms and to find there so much of myself reflected in the story of the Psalms. The Psalms are songs, of course, but they tell a story first because the lyrics are so powerful and reflect what it is that God and his servant David and other servants were going through at any given time. And I just trust that, having nearly completed this series, that when you look at Psalms now, you'll look at Psalms in a fresh way and say these aren't just songs, but these are little mirrors that reflect our heart and the condition of our soul. It's so important for us to see that. Well, today we're going to be talking about thankfulness, and at least I think we are. Okay, this is not working. Okay, thankfulness. Mainly we'll be focusing upon Psalm 16. But Psalm 23 is such a comforting psalm for us, isn't it? That when we think about thankfulness, often our hearts and our minds go to Psalm 23, where there I walk, I shall know no evil, I shall fear no evil. And those comforting words about being taken out to green pastures and walking beside still waters. When you read Psalm 23 and you read about still waters, it's something I shared with the congregation a few years ago, but it really sits with me really powerfully. And that is that still waters give us this picture of peace, don't they? We are led beside still waters. We walk beside still waters in Psalm 23. And yet for a Jew in the day, 2,000 years ago, still waters had a very, very different impression or image about them. Still waters, of course, are deep waters. You notice that? And still waters are deep waters, and deep waters can have hidden things within them. And this was very, very fearful for the Jew, because in the day, still waters were known to keep the Leviathan deep within the bowels of those still waters. Okay, the unknown monsters, if you like, that would come and haunt people in their dreams. And so when we're told that the Lord leads us beside still waters, it's not actually a picture of us being led beside a gentle stream where the waters have ceased to flow, but it's more a picture of God leading us gently through and beside our deepest fears. And that's just so reassuring for us when we look at Psalm 23. Often Psalm 23 is read at a funeral or something of a solemn occasion. And I think when we read about those still waters and the Lord would lead us through our deepest fears, that is an amazing picture, isn't it? And so it is with the Psalms. There's so much imagery there that we can lose ourselves in those songs and lose ourselves by virtue of seeing how it is that those stories reflect back to us what it is that we are experiencing. Could we just got a bit of resonance in my mic here? Thanks. Okay, but thankfulness is not always something that everybody has going on in their lives. Only a month or so ago, Robin Williams took his own life. And I think the world stopped and was shocked at that. Would you? I was. I thought how sad it is that a man who gave so much joy, so much pleasure, so much fun, that when it all melted down, he didn't actually have enough joy or enough thankfulness in his own life to keep his life going. And probably like all of you, when we heard that he died, the first thing that came to your lips was shazbat. Eh? Shazbat. Nanu. Thank you, Mindy. Yeah. And so we find ourselves looking at stories around the world and we think, why is this happiness, why is it so elusive? And yet David in Psalm 16 tells us a story about how he looks at the world, at how he himself becomes a man of great, not only faith, but of joy, contentment, and thankfulness. As somebody who likes to read the scriptures and see how it is that people like David outwork their lives, I'm always interested in what it is that drives somebody, what it is that motivates people. And we live in a world, don't we, where things motivate us. Often we're told that if we have more stuff, then the happier we will be. Well, there's a great little story about 3 Quaker men. You know, we know the Quakers, they live a very, very simple life without electricity, without automobiles. And in doing so, they often reflect upon the rest of society in ways that can be amusing. But the story goes about 3 old Quaker men looking over the back of the farm at a person moving all of their household into this new house. And 3 of them were just leaning over the fence, watching all these electronic gadgets come out of the truck. And as they did, they just kept pouring into the house. And finally, one of the Quakers leaned over to the new neighbor and he said, "Hey, neighbor," he said, "if you find that there's something missing that you've got there with all that electronic stuff," he said, "if you find that there's something missing there or something you need, just come and see us and we'll teach you how to live without it." We'll teach you how to live without it. And actually, Michaela and I are just going through the same transition at the moment. We just spent this weekend and next week having off moving into our house. And the house is smaller than the one we've been on. And by the end of the day, after we'd moved everything, we just this big pile of stuff. And I said, "Honey, we've got to get the digger back. And we just got to dig a big hole in the back section of the yard and just throw all this stuff in there, you know? Because it's amazing how much you can accumulate without even trying to accumulate. You know, you seriously think that we take it with you, don't you? How much value we can put upon things. So here's the Quaker man telling us that life is going to be so much easier if we just get back to the basics, get back to the simple life. You know, life's funny, isn't it? When Michaela and I, first had a family, one of the least celebrated things in child rearing, I believe, is toilet training. It's true, eh? You can't wait for the day until your children, all of them, doesn't matter how many you have, 1 or 100, maybe not 100, but a dozen. And there should be a day celebrated in the family when all the kids can look after themselves and do toilet training, It's just one of those days. And then later on you have another day, when your first child hits the age of 14 and you don't have to pay a babysitter to go out to the movies. You've got these little celebration points. They should have little cards, I think, in the card rack for congratulations, all your children are toilet trained. That should be one of those lovely little cards you should buy. But how life's funny because after our children have sort of left home, we went and got a dog. And No one tells you about how the cute little dog is going to mess in every room of the house until it finally learns that outside is the place to go. And then, after having done all this toilet training with your kids, you take your dog for a walk. And you know what you got to do now? You got to chase the dog around after it's done a poop, put it in a plastic bag and stick it in your pocket and take it home. And you're going, is this called progress? Is this really what life is all about? As you get older, your children can toilet train themselves. Now you chase the poodle around and collect its poop and take it home. I'm like, oh man, and then you stop and you think, well, I've got to be thankful, that my wife and I are out walking and enjoying the walk, and the fact that it's her dog and she picks it up. That's really great, yeah, that's cool. I'm really grateful for that, yeah. But let's have a look at Psalm 16. Read it through with me. And here David is talking about this life that he's living. He says, keep me safe, my God, for in you I take refuge. I could read it from here. It's a bit light. In you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you I have no good thing. I say of the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones in whom is all my delight. Those who run after other gods will suffer more and more. I will not pour out libations of blood to such gods, or take up their names on my lips. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful one see decay. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasure at your right hand. Well, I'm going to go through a list of words today. We're essentially doing a little bit of alliteration here. I've got 5 P's, okay? Sounds like an old guy with night troubles. But it's... Should I apologise for that comment? I apologise for that comment. But we'll pray for people afterwards who are struggling with the joke, that is, yeah. But I can't say it now. I was going to say, here's the first P, but now it's sort of lost. So, I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. Well, the first P is God's presence. God said that he would be our comforter and our guide, the one who strengthens us. And here's the very first thing that King David says about his relationship with God. He says, in a spirit of thankfulness, I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. Maturity in God ultimately comes back to the place when we say, God is enough. God is enough. Remember that final commandment, thou shalt not covet? Okay, thou shalt not covet. That is essentially what David is saying here. I don't need anything more than what I've got, because God, you are enough. And right from the outset in this psalm, as David is getting into this place of worship, the first thing that he says is, God, you are enough. In your presence, God's presence, I find myself complete. I find myself fully complete in you. There's a story I read recently about some missionaries who are in Manila, and they've been working for years in Smoky Mountain. Any of you heard of the Smoky Mountain refugees? People who live literally on the rubbish dump. And they follow the trucks and they scrape through all the rubbish. And they pull out whatever they can find and they recycle it and they sell it and they make a living. In doing this, they give the impression, of course, that they are just incredibly impoverished, poor and desperate. And yet there's a whole thriving community there. Thriving might be a different way of putting it, but thriving from the inside out, not from the outside in. And the missionary became committed to this mission of helping these people when one of the people on the mountain said these comments to him. The missionary went to them and he said, surely you must need more than what you have. Surely you must need more than what you have. And this young man was a Christian, and he says, I don't need anything more than I have because I have Jesus. Because I have Jesus. And for that man living on Smoky Mountain, living on a rubbish dump, that put his perspective in the right place. And it was a real challenge to the missionary, as it would be for any of us reading it or hearing the story today, to be able to say, with Jesus, I have enough. There is enough for today, and there's enough for tomorrow, and there's enough for eternity. The second P that we're talking about comes from the community. David says, I say of the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones in whom is all my delight. They are the noble ones in whom is all my delight. David delighted in God's people. David delighted in God's people. Now, God's people aren't perfect people, are they? They're not perfect people. They are people who are being transformed. And that's the amazing thing about God's people. That's the thing that just makes me so overwhelmed at times, as I just see the beauty of transformation occurring around me. Some people who you've known have been stuck in trouble, stuck with an attitude, stuck with an anger, or stuck with some unforgiveness. And you just see the Lord working in their life over time, and they surrender that, and they give that away. And God's people become people who are always on always changing, always on the move, from the inside out. And I just love God's people. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't. I suppose that would be an obvious thing to say. I love the way they forgive when I make dumb comments during my sermons, as well as anything else. I was about 2 years ago. I was down in Wellington, and I was staying with my daughter, and she had a few of her friends around doing a home group thing. And there was a young guy there, and I got chatting to Johnny, and some of his mates said, "Hey, Johnny, would you be able to play the violin for us?" And I didn't really know much about this guy. I'd seen him play at a wedding, and he pulled out his violin. This young Christian guy, about 6'2", big hulking guy, and he played the violin like I'd never ever heard anything played before. And I just stood there and I said, God, you're so good. Here's a young man devoted to you, devoted to the task, devoted to his craft. And he transpires he's now in the World Youth Orchestra. And he just made something sound absolutely beautiful that moved a grumpy old guy like myself to tears. You see, God's people have this wonderful capacity to touch and change the world. And no matter what they do, their intent and their purpose and their mission in life is never just the work that they do, the skills that they've trained for, and working on the things that they've already been given. Their desire is to change the world with what they've got, to change the world for God and with God. And that's what I love about God's people. There's always something transformational happening. There's always a bigger purpose, a better purpose than what it might just simply be on the surface. And friends, don't bag the church. Don't bag the church. You know, it's a little bit like am I allowed to say another bad joke? It's a little bit like the Irishman who went to the drive-in movie, didn't like the movie, and so he slashed the seats. Sorry to the Irish. Okay, he didn't like the movie, so he slashed the seats. You see, the church is us. The church is the body. And when somebody says to me, oh, you know, the church really hurt me, I'll say, who was it? Who was it? It's not the church, goodness sake. You know, it's never the church, it's a who. And somewhere in the midst of some stories of difficulty or pain, find out where the who is, work out how you can reconcile with that person, or at least work towards a better place of forgiveness. Because the church doesn't hurt people. There are people who can hurt people, yes, but the church is the bride of Christ. It's a beautiful place. It's and God, and here we find in David's psalm, he talks about the people as being the noble ones, in whom his delight is. Okay, the next one is, sorry, I missed that one. The next one is God's provision. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. We're talking here about God's provision. You know, often we measure what we've got compared to somebody else. That's just human nature, isn't it? It's human nature. And yet, God says, if your delight is in me, you will be content with where the boundary lines have fallen in your life. It's not about having a lot or a little. In fact, as you get older and older, as most of you will experience, doesn't matter if you're young or old, you'll know that things don't make people happy. Okay, some of the saddest stories come from us throughout history from some of the wealthiest people. And so we should have learned by now that God's provision is about His joy in our lives. And that only comes through thankfulness. That only comes through being able to say, God, I thank you for what you've given me, and I'm thankful for where I am right now. Now, we can always have aspirations. We can always have desires. Michaela and I laughed. We just built this house. That's what we've been moving into this week. First time we've ever built a house. And, well, I shouldn't say I built it. You pay someone else to build it. Sounds really grand, doesn't it, when you say you built the house? I didn't build the house. You wouldn't want to live in a house that I build. You know, you wouldn't want to go near it. But I said to Michaela, I'm going to make a comment now that is just so human. And I looked around. We moved into the house on the weekend, and I said, you know what? I would love for this part of the house to be 1 meter longer. I'm looking at it, you know, and I laughed. She laughed. I said, isn't that such a human comment? Just 1 meter longer. Then we could have had a little bit of extra stretch in this room, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's just, I just laugh at myself because I'm thinking, there I am, Adam. I am way back in the Garden of Eden, aren't I, when I say a comment like that? And I'm just reaching out for that apple, that one thing that I can't have, but I've got everything else in front of me. The Lord's laid a wonderful table before me. You know, the boundary lines have fallen in pleasant places, and I'm going, I just grab that apple. I need that too, you know? It's just so human. And yet if we stop and we say, God, I'm grateful for what I've got, where I am right now. And seriously, you know, in New Zealand, well, you know, if you're just having a bad day, just say, thank God I'm not living in Syria, you know, and you can just rattle them off. You know, I don't know what the odds are of living in New Zealand, but I think it must be right up there with winning lotto. You know, 4.2 million compared to 7.5 billion in the world. You know, we just don't know how blessed we are. And we've got to stop at times and put it all into perspective. And David did just that in this psalm. I read a really good story recently about this chap here, King Edward VI. Now, he's become a little bit more famous as a bit of history was drawn back into our 21st century with this film called The King's Speech, with Colin Firth played him marvelously well. And we saw the battle that this guy had when he was given the crown after his brother abdicated. And he was underprepared for this position, and he had to lead Britain through World War II. But what historians don't tell us much about is that he had a devout and ongoing faith. King Edward would go on a Sunday to a relatively small Brethren chapel, and he would worship and fellowship with just everyday folk every Sunday. King George, why am I calling him King Edward? Sorry about that. King George, thank you for that. Should look at my notes here. My notes say King Edward, I got it wrong. I knew it was King George. Yeah, I knew that, sorry. Who was that? Was that Richard? No? A poem here, yeah, that's good. I thought it sounded, thank you, Guy. That's lovely of you. But you knew who I meant, yeah. That's the other poem behind you, that's right. The Kiwis are going, who? Yeah? Who? We're having a bit of fun today, aren't we? Mostly at my expense. That's okay. King George VI went on tour after the war. And he went up to Canada, and the Canadian government were putting on this sort of tour for him. And they asked one of the well-known Indian chiefs by the name of, I'll get it right, Chief Whitefeather, to sing a song. He said, would you sing a song for the king when he comes? And the chief said, yeah, that'll be my pleasure. And so the time came, and the chief walked forward. And of course, everybody knew what to expect, some sort of native Indian song. And he started singing, I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be his than have riches untold. And the song goes on. And I didn't sing it very well. You're so easy to please, Linda. She's thankful that I didn't sing the whole thing. Yeah. And so he sung this song, and the officials were like, sort of a bit embarrassed, because he was being an Indian, he was supposed to sing an Indian song. But after singing this song, saying, I'd rather have Jesus than riches or gold, than silver or gold, King George walked up to him and said, so would I. So would I. Isn't that cool? And I think sometimes these stories just put it into perspective. Here's a person who has now led Britain through a world war, and yet in those moments where he measures everything against everything, he knows that his faith in Christ is the most important thing for him. And so with those 3 words, so would I, he melted the hearts of the people who were there and put in perspective in history who he was as a man. So would I. God's practices. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. And what we're talking here is about the Lord's practices. The Lord's practices, God's practices. We're talking about joy that comes from obedience. Joy that comes from obedience. You cannot live in 2 worlds. And so here David is saying, I will walk as God instructs me, as he instructs my heart. He instructs my heart at night. He instructs my heart at day. And he's saying that I take great pleasure, I take great joy out of doing things God's way. Now, as Christians, essentially what we should be doing is always asking, what is God's way? How can I do this the way Jesus would do it? How can I do this in a way that honors God with my life? One of the biggest challenges these days that we face is busyness, isn't it? And if you look to the States, where often there's a lead in culture over there, it's only going to get busier. One of the things that's been really important for me over the years is to try to work out these 3 reservoirs in my life. Okay, if you get these 3 reservoirs working well, you find that your life has a balance. Now, what actually occurs often, and I see this from a pastoral perspective, is that people come to me and they say, oh, my spiritual life is just so miserable. God is so far from me. The heavens are brass. He's just not in my life. I don't have anything going on here that seems like remotely like God's activity. And when I test somebody about that, I find that physically, they're not doing so good, they're not getting out and about, not looking after themselves. Emotionally, they're totally wiped out because they're working too hard, there's a lot of pressure on, people are demanding of them, and it can become a really, really hard thing. They go to a funeral and they don't cry, they go to a funny movie and they don't laugh. You just emotionally just flatlined it. And these are the simple tests that you can give to yourself in respect to how you're doing. Are you allowing too much stress to come into your life? Are you getting overburdened by something? Is something consuming you to the point where you've lost your joy, lost your zeal? And the answer will be yes at some stage during your life or during the year. What though we find is that your spiritual life can be relatively quick to pick up. God's good. If we just take some time out, read Scripture and start to work at just hearing the voice of God, the restoration of your spiritual life, because of the grace of God, is relatively quick to fix. Your physical life, if you can get out and about, even if you're not in very good shape, just that walk down the beach, you can start building that back into your life. But your emotional life is the hardest thing to get back into shape. It really does take quite a while. You need to put your emotional life sort of on this trickle charge battery and allow it to be renewed and restored over time. It literally won't happen over a week or even 3 weeks. You need sometimes months to turn around what it is that you need to put right. And so when we talk about God's practices, we're talking there about putting your life in a place where it's obedient to the Word, the rhythms of life, your spiritual life, and putting some things in place that actually help you enjoy God, help you come to that place of thankfulness. And finally, the fifth P. Therefore my heart is glad, and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful one see decay. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy, in your presence with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Finally, we're talking here about God's protection. God's grace upon each of us, and I'm going to tighten this up a little bit because I'm running out of time. God's grace upon each one of us says that I will never forsake you, and I will never leave you. I will never forsake you, and I will never leave you. And so we can hold on to that promise no matter where we are, no matter what the challenges that we face are. And that means that we have the opportunity to say to God, I'm grateful, God, that you will never leave me. I'm thankful that your grace is sufficient for me. I'm thankful that, as the psalmist says, he will guide us and take us into eternity and where we will find companionship with him. And so when we look at the man in the mirror, we look at Psalm 16 and we ask ourselves, am I thankful? Am I thankful? Do I stop and say, God, thanks for your grace in my life that allows me to be able to say, today I'm tremendously grateful. In spite of all the challenges that I've got ahead of me, in spite of the difficulties that I may have endured, right now I'm really, really thankful. We're going to hear a testimony from a lady from our church, Estee Creek, and she's here today. And so we're just going to let this roll. And then the final song in today's service is a song that's going to be led or played to us as Psalm 40 by U2. So let's listen to Estee's testimony. Thank you.
I remember as a young child, I would walk and I would visualize, they were saying, you know, you've got a guardian angel. I've got my guardian angel next to me. And when you get that tingly feeling down your spine, I was like, that's my angel. It was definitely a spiritual awareness now looking back. And when I was 16 years of age, my dad died. With my dad, we had a real special bond. And I do think, you know, I was angry at God. Why did he do that? Just about, I would say 3 months after he passed away, I met Rian, my husband. I think growing up in those early years with our relationship, I put actually all my hope on him. You know, he was my strength. I would look at him for my strength. So I actually did move away from God. Everything was obviously moonshine and roses in the beginning. And then I started becoming very jealous. I was afraid of losing him. It didn't even become better after we got married. It was worse. And I said to him, you know, it was never about me having a bad self-image or, you know, comparing myself with other women, because I was afraid that he would actually leave me and go, you know, after another woman. Because when my dad died, my dad was my everything. And so when he died, I actually got my security in Rian, and that was never supposed to be. I actually had to get that from God. So Rian and I said, okay, you know, we're going to start a family. And it didn't happen. For about 7.5 years, we tried. And I thought, you know, I am such a bad person, that's why I couldn't get pregnant. So all just about me. And, you know, why is God not giving us a baby? I could not understand it. Rian's brother, being very in touch with God, you know, he would encourage us and say to us, I just know you'll have a baby. I just know. And I could see it in his face, he knew it. And this specific morning, it was a Sunday morning, I said to Rian, I actually think I'm pregnant. So I took the test and I could hear a text message coming through. And I said to Rian, that is your brother, I know it. It is him, and he's saying, this is going to happen, but not necessarily now. When I looked at the test, it was negative. The second part of this message was go and pray with someone. I said, we have to be obedient. And this is totally out of Rian and my comfort zone, is to go to someone to pray with us. So we went to our preacher, and I thought, oh, this guy is just going to think we are totally mad. But while we were talking about this, the tears just ran down his cheeks, and he said, it's beautiful. He said, I would be honored to pray with you. And a few months after that, I was pregnant. It's actually strange how you go through something so deep and spiritual, and still then we missed it. We didn't get that connection. So we ended up coming to New Zealand. Through Rian's work, he met Norman. I just knew there was something different about Norman. I said, you know, Norman, when I met you, it felt like you could see into my soul. I said, that was scary. Norman and Marion started saying, but you know, you've got to come and try our church. Come to Bethlehem Baptist. And I'm like, okay. And I remember when the service started with the worship, but just everything, the worship and the sermon itself, I knew that there was something there. That is what we were looking for. We were always the people going to the sermon and leaving. We did not stay for coffee. Eventually they got us to stay for coffee, and that's how we met people. The big thing is you can go to church and you can go home, but where is the family, where's the church family, is the people that you actually stay after the sermon and have coffee with. You know, I knew the Bible, I knew the stories, but I actually didn't, the faith part and what it is that means, you know, to have a relationship with God. I didn't really get that, because in our church they baptized babies. We were baptized as babies. And I said to Rian, I am getting baptized. Well, I can't speak in front of people. And I had so many people praying for me. Our home group prayed for me. I didn't sleep for a week. I rewrote my testimony, I don't know how many times. On the day of the baptism, I was just nervous wreck. I so felt God's presence there, and tears was going. I actually could talk through my whole testimony, but it was just amazing because I could feel God there with me. I was not alone, and I just knew from that day on, when we obey God, when He said get baptized, and I will be with you, He will be there with you. And I think I'm now at the stage where I want to say to God, if you want to call me, wherever, I am listening now. I can see it works out better. I'm just really waiting for Him to say to me, Esty, this is what I want you to do. This is where I want you to go.